Well, what happened in that study? They stopped the study early because too many of the veterans were dying early who were in the Retin-A group. Too many of them were dying. And then the kicker to this is they had actually not allowed veterans in the study, if they thought they had a high risk of dying early, they did not allow them in the study. So they'd already separated out the people they thought were going to die.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this episode, I sit down with Naturopathic Doctor Garrett Smith to dive into the complex world of psoriasis and explore a surprising potential factor behind the condition, vitamin A. We discuss how this essential nutrient, often held for its health benefits, may actually play a role in triggering not just psoriasis, but a range of other health issues as well. Dr. Smith breaks down the science, challenges the conventional wisdom, and offers insights into how diet and lifestyle changes could alleviate symptoms for those suffering from these conditions. Tune in for a thought-provoking conversation that may change how you view vitamin A and its impact on your health. Dr. Garrett Smith, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So, Garrett, to kick things off, could you share a little bit about your own health journey and also your academic and professional background?
Oh, wow. Well, it does all tie together. So my my health journey, I think it started around, well, I started with weight training around 11, started lifting weights in my room. My dad got me a bodybuilding book and I got into it. And so fitness, as I've said before, eventually leads to nutrition. And I started doing nutrition. I got some skin fungus as a kid, took a medication called ketoconazole. That kind of started my health, on a downhill slope. If people go and look up the research on ketoconazole, they'll find that it absolutely destroys testosterone production in men. So that little start kind of led to everything else. So then, fitness led to nutrition. Nutrition led to me getting a degree I got my undergrad in physiology in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a personal trainer. Fitness turned into a job. And then I ended up working in a supplement store. And I'm still working on my health. I still had health issues. I even started getting like prostate type urinary issues in my mid-20s in medical school. And my dad died of prostate cancer. So this was a big concern, like genetically and other stuff like that. So I was trying to fix it. But anyway, undergrad in physiology. After I got out of school, I ended up working in a supplement store because I was good at supplements, being in bodybuilding and stuff like that. And then I found out about naturopathic medical school in Arizona. There's one of the 5 schools in the country. And we're one of the, 16 or 17 states that actually license naturopathic physicians. So I have like a real medical license here. I can do injections. I can do all sorts of things up through medications should I choose to, which I don't do at all. And then, so that led to medical school, and then medical school came out. I got out of there. I started practicing in about 2006, had a brick and mortar practice until about 6 months before COVID hit.
Good timing.
And I realized, what's that?
Good timing.
Yeah, good timing. It was very lucky. I consider myself a very lucky person. And we did that, and we started working. My office manager works out of her place and I work out of my place. And we've had clients in 29 countries now so far. And so things are going pretty good. But then over time, I'd realized that nearly all of my clients were from out of town. They were not in my city. So it was an easy thing to decide to move online. And now we've got, over 2,000 people active in our network, in our Love Your Liver program. And we've got new practitioners starting. We're going to be starting, doing some seminars soon. I'm going to be doing some training seminars in how to read blood and hair analysis like I do. And yeah, so things are going pretty good, but that's kind of the background. Yeah.
So, the topic that we want to talk about today, again, is part of your journey, so to speak. Can you give us an idea of your history with psoriasis?
Oh yeah. So I remember as a teenager, I started noticing these spots on the top of my toes, and they would just always be dry, and I could scrub them to death in the shower, and they wouldn't scrub off. They'd keep coming back, and I thought it might be from like rubbing my feet on the ground, but that didn't make any sense. And then eventually, I ended up getting some spots on my knuckles. They'd always be between my knuckles. And it never really bothered me that much. I did notice that my diet and other things that I was doing over time, I noticed that did affect it. I could never put together why or what it was. I just noticed that they would go up and down. And so being that I like to recognize patterns, I was kind of going, what is going on here? And I also had a history of tinea versicolor, which was a skin fungus. Not a big deal fungus, but it just makes it so on your pale areas you don't tan, or no, on your pale areas it looks reddish and dry, and on your tanner areas it looks white and dry. And I had a history as a kid of having athlete's foot several times. I had a history of dandruff, so I obviously was having a lot of skin stuff going on top of the psoriasis. And one of the things, at one point I did this kind of a Matt Stone 180-degree health kind of peating oriented approach where I was eating a ton of calories. But I also decided at that time, I'd heard about, this was like how I got into how I'd look at nutritional medicine. A dermatologist had told me, because I was like, I'm not going to do ketoconazole again. I'm just not going to do it. Whether it's the topical or the oral, I'm not taking it again. He said, well, you could do like either Head and Shoulders or Selsun Blue as a shampoo on the tinea versicolor, because that was more what I was concerned about, because that was more of the visual one. And he said, you just goop it on, like shampoo while you're dry, and let it sit on there for 20 or 30 minutes a day, and it'll get rid of the tinea versicolor. And he said, but once you stop doing that, every summer this will come back. And I was thinking about it, and I went, why would it come back every summer? And he said, well, if you're the type that gets it, that you're susceptible to it, it's in the air all the time. And when the summer comes and you start getting sweaty again, you're going to have it again. And I was like, I don't like the whole genetic victim mentality kind of thing. Like, I'm just a victim of my genetics. And so when he said the selenium thing, or when he said Selsun Blue and he said Head and Shoulders, I thought, well, what's in those? What's making it go away? And I go, in Selsun Blue, the active ingredient is selenium, an essential mineral, and Selsun Blue is zinc. So I thought, well, if the skin cells on the top of the body, right, the skin cells are made from the bottom up and they come out, right? So I thought, well, this must mean that by the time they're reaching the top, they're selenium deficient, and we're somehow replenishing them with selenium from the top down. It made sense to me. So I thought, well, why can't I just take selenium internally and fill them then from the bottom up? So I did. I took a pretty high dose of selenium. I did my research. I saw that like the highest short-term safe dose. Now, I'm not advocating anybody to do what I did. Now I would do testing. I do hair testing to look at selenium, and we have a very good record of fixing it quite easily, and nearly everybody's deficient. But anyway, I took 600 micrograms for about a month, which is the max limit short term. And then I took 400 micrograms for 2 months. And then I went down to the very normal 200 micrograms a day after that. Well, after those couple of months, the tinea versicolor went away. So then I started going, oh, nutrition is connected to your skin. So over time, I started, the dandruff was still kind of around. The psoriasis was still kind of around. The athlete's foot passed as a kid. It didn't come back anymore. And then, but I also used one of those azole meds, Mycotin, which I believe is miconazole. So another azole med like ketoconazole. Well, azole meds, as I've learned later, specifically slow down a detox enzyme in your body called aldehyde dehydrogenase, which is a huge part of my work now, like helping people to restore. We don't try to boost ALDH. We try to restore their ALDH to its proper function. It's like we don't want to put a turbocharger on an engine that sucks. We want to fix the engine before we ever even think about a turbocharger. So anyway, then I eventually got to the point where, well, Matt Stone, the guy who helped me kind of figure out that, well, it was I did the same high calorie diet at the same time I did the selenium. I really think it was the selenium. And as I know now, I have a pretty high need compared to others of selenium and zinc and molybdenum. I mean, I am a 200-pound guy, but I also seem to have a high need. So anyway, I found out about, through Matt Stone, Grant Genereux. So Grant, Genereux. His website is ggenereux.blog. So not .com, but .blog. He has 3 free ebooks there about how he solved his own. He had jaundice. He had terrible eczema, which was his biggest concern because of the appearance of it. But I mean, he was yellow. So he was yellow with like bleeding and oozing eczema in his armpits and other places. He was in a bad way. He had chronic kidney disease to the point that his doctors were basically telling him, you're going to go on dialysis soon. You're either going to go on dialysis or you're basically going to croak. So he decided, as an engineer, which I respect it when people come into, medical or nutrition stuff with other mindsets, because the medical mindset as a whole is just terrible, as most of us know. It's not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So he looked up what foods trigger eczema. And he found that he looked at the list and he cross-compared them to see what nutrients or toxins work in common between the 10 foods. And he found that 9 of the 10 foods contained vitamin A. So he then created his own diet just based on what he knew about nutrition. He didn't know, here's the funny thing about the diet he figured out. As I've been going backwards and kind of reverse engineering this whole thing based on his success, his diet was nearly perfect from all the stuff I found. He didn't know anything about this, but he kind of made this diet up. He calls it his prison diet. It's basically beef or bison, white or brown rice, and black beans was what he did. So it's a very low vitamin A diet. And he's been doing basically slight variations of this diet, but mostly that diet for going on 10 years now. And he has gotten his vitamin A level down to below lab detection limits. So they can't even tell him where it's at because they only measure down to a certain point. And he has fixed the jaundice. He has fixed the eczema. He has fixed his chronic kidney disease. He is the only person his nephrologists have seen who has fixed their chronic kidney disease and come out of it, and all their labs are normal now. So I got into the diet. I was about halfway through his first book. I'd been having a lot of success in my practice up to that point. I was doing hair analysis and I was doing nutrition stuff, and I was having a lot of success in my practice. But there was some of my long-term patients were having some nagging issues either creep up or come back. Being the person that I am, I didn't blame them. I tried to tell them things that I thought might work, or things to do a little bit more of this or a little bit less of that, or make sure you're not eating this or whatever. But I didn't know about the vitamin A thing. So then when I read Grant's book, I was about halfway through it, and I kind of sat back in my chair. I remember this, and I thought to myself, like, I have to change everything, because I had been having people eat more vitamin A in their diet. I had been having people supplement vitamin A as retinol palmitate. I had been having people supplement vitamin A as beef liver capsules. I had been doing vitamin A in my practice as I was taught in hair analysis. And people were getting better even with that. But over time, they were developing stuff, because one of the biggest things about vitamin A is that it accumulates in fat cells. It accumulates anywhere you can store it, any place in your body that has fat. So that's one of the things that people seem to have forgotten these days, is a lot of people are really pushing the fat soluble vitamins hard, whether it's vitamin D or vitamin A or vitamin E. And it's always been known that these are fat soluble vitamins. And if you take in more than you excrete in a daily basis for a long time, you are accumulating it. It's just math, right? It's just like your bank account, right? If you put in more money than you take out, your bank account grows. Well, that's what happens with toxic stuff too. So I started doing this kind of low vitamin A diet. I did my own version. I was never one to like going on the same diet every day. Really kind of, it's just not going to fit with my mental state. Grant can do it. He's an engineer. He's just like, I'm just going to eat so I can live, and doesn't really care. And a lot of people are like that in our group. But I wanted to expand it to find what are as many low vitamin A foods that work that we can eat. And as I did this, all of a sudden, as I went along, all of a sudden one day my psoriasis was gone. All of a sudden I went along and my really bad chronic insomnia was gone. Do it all of a sudden as I go along, my urinary prostate issues are gone. And the dandruff went away. So all these things that were connected. Now, I'm not saying it's all vitamin A toxicity, because there's other things that we're fixing along the way. But taking that out, considering my history, oh my gosh, I did the Weston Price kind of diet for a while, which is full of vitamin A, eggs and dairy and liver and all that stuff. I did the raw primal diet for a while, where I was eating raw egg yolks and raw dairy and raw liver and all the stuff. I took high dose astaxanthin for a while, which is the stuff that makes salmon colored and makes flamingos pink. It's a carotenoid. It's a form of plant vitamin A. I did all the chlorellas and the spirulinas and the seaweeds and I've done I did retinol palmitate. I did cod liver oil. I did all these forms of vitamin A in my time, hearing that they were good for me and not realizing that they all kind of overlapped on each other and stored. So over time, as I got off of that, problems went away. And now we have lots of people who are avoiding vitamin A. They're what we call it reducing or minimizing it. You cannot eat a zero vitamin A diet. And I've emphasized this many, many times. There is no such thing as a zero vitamin A diet. And probably if somebody tried to do it, they would be eating such purified food-like substances that they wouldn't be getting enough of their other minerals. They'd be causing other problems. And this is what researchers in the vitamin A field have said for a very long time. They talked about low vitamin A diets, and they said you just can't do a zero one without causing other nutrient deficiencies. And I agree with that. So one of the ideas I get into for people out there who may have really, really limited their diets is that if you decide that there's too many toxins in food, and you decide that if you come to the conclusion that you want zero toxins in all your food, you end up with nothing to eat, and then you're going to starve to death and kill yourself anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the very act of breathing is killing us. Like we're oxidizing, we're rusting ourselves from the inside out. But we can't get away from that. You have to breathe to live. So, sugars turning into starches, and sugars are turning into aldehydes in your system, and alcohol, and like all these things. The very act of living, we make waste. We make toxicity. And one of the things that we try to do in this program is like, okay, so if living is going to make enough toxicity, the biggest thing we can do is to not put toxins in that then further stress the system. It's as simple as that. We're just saying we reduce it. We're going to be exposed to this stuff. We still want to be able to live our lives and go out and, people on the program go out and do things that maybe aren't in line with the program at times. But that's part of life. Like, you want to be able to do life well so that you can go out and have fun at times. But so all of my issues went away. We have lots of other people with issues that went away that nobody would have ever necessarily connected with vitamin A toxicity. But they just get on this diet, or this approach, I should say, because it's not one diet. And then they see their issues go away. We do a lot of, let me just add one more thing. We do a lot of zinc repletion. We do a lot of people are either getting zinc from a lot of red meat, or they tend to be taking a supplement based on, I do blood testing and hair testing for zinc. Zinc is critical for skin and critical for vitamin A detox. So it fits into both. Whenever I see skin issues, I think zinc deficiency and vitamin A toxicity.
Yeah.
So that's what I've got. I can go into the research, a little bit of the research on psoriasis and stuff connected to vitamin A.
Yeah. We'll definitely do that. Before we go there, what I'd quite like to get an idea of is your personal experience with psoriasis. Like, what was it like for you to experience psoriasis, and what ages were you when you were suffering with psoriasis?
Well, in terms of probably your listeners here, your viewers, I didn't have it bad at all.
Right.
I had it. I had some dry spots, and eventually I think a dermatologist I went to just get like a yearly checkup at the time, because my ex wanted me to at the time. And I just went, and they're like, oh yeah, I said, what are these? And he goes, that's psoriasis. And I was like, oh, okay. Like it didn't bother me. So I'm really sorry for those of you out there who have really bad issues with it, because I'm sure it sucks. Mine was not like life affecting. It was more of, I just noticed I had it, and then I noticed that as we went along, we fixed it. Gotcha. So I never did anything topical for it. I mean, I might have tried some topical things, but nothing ever really moved the needle. And until I finally got to this work. So my experience with psoriasis was very mild compared to everybody else out here. But I had multiple skin issues, so I had all sorts of things going on in my history.
Yeah, I mean, going back quite a long time, I had acne for 18 years, but I also had eczema for about 18 months, I think. It's hard to remember exactly the timelines, but at the same time I had acne, I had eczema as well, and I had both on my face at the same time some days, which was pretty horrendous. So what I've got from you so far is that, you know, what you've experienced is that you had skin conditions, including psoriasis, and when you lowered your vitamin A intake, that really was the, you know, hitting the bullseye, so to speak, in terms of getting a resolution to it. Why do you think that that's the case? So I'm sure this is where you might dig into the research now.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd like to introduce you to Jill. Jill was a holistic lifestyle coach and Pilates instructor who had been struggling with eczema for her entire life. Despite following a healthy diet and lifestyle, her eczema had spread all over her body, leaving her frustrated and self-conscious. After thorough testing, we discovered that Jill had a parasite infection, leaky gut syndrome, and toxic overload. With a customized diet plan and a protocol to heal her gut and balance her gut microbiome, Jill started to see incredible results. In just a short amount of time, Jill's skin cleared up, and she experienced a newfound sense of confidence and self-esteem. Thanks to the support she received, Jill was more able to socialize, feel more confident in her work, and ultimately live a happier and healthier life. If you're struggling with eczema, don't wait any longer. Seek the help that you need and start living your best life today. Contact me today and see how I can help you on your journey to great skin, because everyone deserves to feel their best, just like Jill. If you'd like to transform your skin like Jill did, request a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. Now, back to the podcast.
Well, one of the mechanisms that people need to understand about what we call the vitamin A, because it's not a vitamin. We have people thriving with zero serum retinol, like basically below lab detection limits. Like they can't measure that small, and they're thriving with it. We've seen multiple people. There are now multiple people on forums who have had type 1 diabetes who have said that it's gone. I personally have a client who did what we call the cowboy diet. She did beef and beans, and she completely reversed cirrhosis. And then there's Grant with his chronic kidney disease. He now has another person who has contacted him who has gotten out of their chronic kidney disease. So we have these like major diseases that are resolving. So, gosh, I kind of lost what your question was in the middle of that.
So kind of like, what's the mechanism, if you like, of too much vitamin A causing things like psoriasis?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we know about. So retinoic acid. when you consume vitamin A, whether that's beta carotene or retinol, which is what's in animal foods, but retinol is in animal foods like cod liver oil or liver or dairy or whatever, as retinol esters. It's a retinol bound to a fatty acid. And that's actually the same way that we store it in our body. We bind retinol to a free fatty acid ester, and then we store it in the liver. Now, research shows that retinol is free retinol that's floating around, not bound to retinol binding protein. Free retinol is extremely damaging. Retinaldehyde, which is the next step that it turns into. So, retinaldehyde, it's an aldehyde. Aldehydes are bad across the board. Like there's no aldehyde that is actually a vitamin. And then retinaldehyde, this is where we get into the mechanism. Retinaldehyde actually turns into retinoic acid. Retinoic acid is the one that we know causes lots of problems. Anybody who knows about Accutane, which is called isotretinoin or 13-cis-retinoic acid, knows when you've seen the side effects, or maybe people out there have had the side effects of it, that don't necessarily go away until we can fix them, but they don't necessarily go away on their own. So Accutane just destroys people's systems. But the other thing that it turns into, so on that note, when people say, but that's a drug, that's not what's in your body. It is exactly the same thing. In people who eat vitamin A, that vitamin A will turn via the detox system. It turns, this is a very weird thing, but there's a thing in detox in the body called biotransformation. Biotransformation is confusing to people because they don't want to believe that this is true. But when certain toxins come into our system, the detox process actually turns them into more toxic substances along the way. The most obvious example of this is alcohol. The ethanol that you drink as alcohol isn't the worst thing in your body. It is when the ethanol turns into acetaldehyde through the detox process. Acetaldehyde is the cause of your hangovers. Acetaldehyde is the cause of alcohol poisoning. Acetaldehyde is the reason why alcohol could kill somebody. So it wasn't the ethanol that did it. It's the acetaldehyde. So as vitamin A goes through its process, then it turns into retinaldehyde, which is worse than retinol, and then it turns into retinoic acid. So the familiarity, the thing I want to talk about with retinoic acid is all trans retinoic acid. This is another one that it turns into. So for anybody who doubts this, you can go into the research and find that people who eat, if normal people off the street who are eating vitamin A, just like normal, the vitamin A is turning into 13-cis-retinoic acid and all trans retinoic acid, and they can find it in people's blood and they can find it in their urine. Now, these two drugs, one is Accutane and the other one is Retin-A that people often put on their face. So, retinoic acid, all trans retinoic acid specifically, is used in aesthetic medicine as a chemical peel. So they put it on people's faces. It's also called a yellow peel. And what it does is it's dissolving the upper layers of skin, the upper skin cell layers, and then kind of getting the body to make new skin cells underneath it. So when you're dissolving skin cells, let's go into the body now. So if you were eating vitamin A and you were turning vitamin A into retinoic acid, usually when people say retinoic acid by itself, they mean all trans retinoic acid. That's what the research tends to do. So you've got retinoic acid in your gut. Well, if it's dissolving upper layers of skin cells, nobody ever before this seemed to have a good reason why leaky gut happened. They'd just be like, don't eat these foods. These foods cause leaky gut. And you go, why? How are they eating holes in the gut? Well, now that we talk about retinoic acid, which dissolves layers of skin cells, now we have a very good mechanism of how things could cause leaky gut from what we eat. Now, another thing about this is celiac disease. There were scientists trying to make a cell model of celiac disease with gut cells. They could not get the proper inflammation they needed for the model until they added retinoic acid to it. So they couldn't destroy the gut cells like they needed to until they added retinoic acid. So when you're thinking about your gut, we start talking about retinoic acid and how damaged it can be. Now imagine this. Okay, so one of the things, I don't know if we're going to have time to get into it today, but one of my big concepts about, like, it's a whole new paradigm of health and how our own bile, our own toxic bile, which contains the vitamin A that the liver is trying to get rid of, is leaking into our bloodstream and causing our chronic issues. So your liver makes toxic bile. Bile is toxic by nature. It is the most toxic fluid in your body. It is how the liver gets rid of toxins. Because the liver has to, people talk about the liver detoxing, but the liver has to get rid of those toxins that came to it, right? Even a sewage processing plant has to get rid of the stuff that comes to it. Mm-hmm. So how does the liver get rid of these toxins? Well, it puts it in the bile. This bile is really toxic, and it eats holes in, as it gets more and more toxic, it eats more holes in things. As people get more and more vitamin A toxic, it eats more holes in things. So it eats holes in the liver itself. It eats holes in the bile ducts. It eats holes in the intestines. If it goes back up into your stomach, it can eat holes in your stomach called ulcers. And your stomach can even absorb it directly through the walls. Once these leaks happen or this absorption happens, it goes into your bloodstream. Now, once it's in your bloodstream, so you got this is how vitamin A gets into your blood, is through toxic leaky bile. So now it's going in the blood everywhere in your body. If the liver is not getting rid of it, and if the kidneys can't get rid of it fast enough, and the kidneys really don't like it, this is how the chronic kidney disease and all these kidney problems happen too. So your kidneys don't like the bile, and if they can't get rid of it fast enough, our third major route of detox is through the skin. The problem, so imagine if you have retinoic acid coming up and out through the skin. It's going to basically burn and attack everything it touches on the way out. Now, the thing that makes the skin different, especially in long-term skin issues, different than the kidneys and liver, is that once you put the bile into the poop and you poop it out, it's basically gone. Once you put the toxic bile and the vitamin A into the pee and you pee it out, it's gone. What happens with your skin? Well, it's constantly coming out of your skin, and it's not necessarily it's not leaving. It's just sitting in the tissue. And so it can really just sit there and do its damage. So it's really the retinoic acid most likely that is causing a lot of the long-term crusting and dry skin and all that stuff. One of the known things of people who like get acute vitamin A toxicity, like stories of, people who have eaten polar bear liver or seal liver, or the stories of the guy who had to eat his sled dogs. One of the big things that happens when people get acute vitamin A toxicity is their skin gets very red and very dry and peeling. Well, what do most skin issues look like, right? Redness and dryness and peeling. So it is actually the vitamin A coming out of the skin as the body tries to detox it that is causing the damage. And then there's other things too, other factors why people have one skin issue versus another. That's like the recipe of the bile. That's a whole nother kind of topic in toxic bile theory. But that's really the mechanism of it. It's just burning your skin and it's just sitting there. Yeah. This is why, like, as an example, with acne, some people find with acne, if they regularly wash their face, like maybe multiple times a day, their acne can be a lot better. Well, what are they cleaning off? If somebody says oils, well, then you go, okay, so what is vitamin A? Is it fat soluble? Is it in the oils? That's where it would be. So you're washing off the oils that have the toxins in them, and you're having less of an inflammatory reaction. It's not fixing the cause. It's just treating the symptom. Yeah. So that's the mechanism that I go by.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So something that you kind of just mentioned, I guess, is, well, not really mentioned, but what would you say are the main differences between normal skin and the skin of someone that has psoriasis? I'm briefly interrupting this episode to remind you can now hear an extra No Punches Pulled episode every month with an amazing and almost certainly controversial guest who's not scared to put their head above the parapet. These guests are exposing lies and corruption, sharing their stories of being gaslit or cancelled for telling the truth, and offering real-world solutions to achieving optimal health and maintaining freedom amidst increasing censorship and restrictive regulations. These are the types of episodes I started producing back in 2022, for which I was cancelled on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and deplatformed from LinkedIn. These additional episodes are for subscribers only. For the equivalent of one takeaway coffee per month, you can now become a paid subscriber and receive exclusive access to content the authorities do not want you to hear. I really hope you can support the podcast to help it continue, and also to help me bring you even better, more controversial, educational, and inspiring guests. Subscribing to the Radical Health Rebel podcast is a much more productive investment than supporting organizations that feed you lies, propaganda, and predictive programming like TV licensing, cable, satellite, and major film streaming services. Subscribing to the Radical Health Rebel podcast to receive premium content couldn't be simpler. Just go to the show notes, click on support the show, and follow the instructions. In fact, why not do it right now? And once you've subscribed, come straight back and listen to the rest of the episode. For the equivalent of just one takeaway coffee per month, let's rebel against the mainstream narrative and create a healthier, fairer, and freer world together. Thanks for listening and for your support.
Okay. Well, there's a paper. I think it was in rats. They put on imiquimod. I'm not really familiar with this chemical, but they use this chemical to induce psoriasis on animals in studies. So they did this to these animals, and then they measured their skin for vitamin A afterwards, vitamin A in various forms of it. And they found that there was more vitamin A in the skin after they damaged it with this chemical. So we start going, the chemical caused the psoriasis, and then we see more vitamin A there. Then there's another paper on psoriasis skin where they showed just regular psoriasis in people, and they found more and more indicators that there was more vitamin A in that skin. And then a 1940 study in JAMA, they put people on a low vitamin A diet. So this is something that has medically been done before for psoriasis. I have a video on my YouTube all about this paper. And they found that after I think by the end of the 12 weeks, or maybe it was longer, 9 of the 12 people had, I think, 75% or more reduction in their psoriasis. So we get into this, a lot of people really want to know the mechanisms. And what do we see? The difference with psoriasis skin is we see more of all the markers of vitamin A, whether it was chemically induced or whether it was just diet and whatever other exposures they had induced. And then we see that in the research, a low vitamin A diet helped resolve it was at least within 6 months. It helped resolve almost completely, 3/4. They only had 12 people doing it, but 9 of them were 75% better at the end of that. So that's the main difference that I see in the research is there's just less, there's more vitamin A in that skin. And that goes along with the retinoic acid theory causing the damage.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, when I'm working with someone with a skin issue, part of the process is, helping their liver to be able to detoxify, maybe doing liver gallbladder cleanses, things like that. And, there are so many toxins in our environment now. They've got heavy metals and, God knows what else we're exposed to. I think we probably don't even know what we're exposed to in total.
Yep.
But it's really interesting that, that's probably a key, if not the key toxin that people are getting exposed to. And I think what's quite interesting is, even though I've been unaware of the vitamin A toxicity, I have been able to help a lot of people with things like psoriasis, eczema. And obviously, if they can improve the amount of or the detox capacity, even without necessarily reducing the amount of vitamin A, then that could potentially be why why they got a good result. But I'd also imagine some people could have a perfectly good liver, good detoxification system, but they would still need to reduce their vitamin A intake. Would that be accurate?
Well, I have come to the conclusion that pretty much all chronic disease stems from the liver and the toxic bile. Now, there are, I don't know what you do with your people commonly, but what I can say is that there are, okay, so like Accutane for acne, right? It's terribly damaging to the liver. And it's been shown to reduce bile production. So with the mechanisms and then some people say, well, I took Accutane and my acne went away forever, or I took it and it worked for a year and then I had to do it again, and these other things. So we always have to get into, if it works, was it moving someone in the right direction? So think about this, and with the idea of toxic bile theory, if we are saying there's it's not necessarily that the liver has issues, but it's more that the liver is just making toxic bile as part of its job. Like the liver's doing its job. It's making toxic bile. Yeah. It's trying to get rid of it. But along the way, it'd be like, I don't know, the water company trying to deliver water to your house and there's a leak in the pipes. And the water company's like, we're doing our job. The pipe is broken. That's not like so the liver's like, I'm delivering the bile. The pipe is broken. It's leaking. The liver can't directly fix that. So what we get into with some of the things that quote unquote work, or that we see the symptoms go down, it may actually be, and I've shown this in some of my live streams, that these things are actually reducing bile production. They're somehow retarding or reducing or inhibiting bile production. So then you got to think about this. You don't dump as much bile, which is the cause of the skin problems at the root. So you don't dump as much. So then all of a sudden you see the skin issues get better. And we think we're doing something good because, you're happy that the client's better. The client's happy that they're better, which is the most important thing. But then if we see things tend to come back over time, or if we see new health issues pop up, then that's because we're blocking the natural detox system. And sometimes when we do things that kind of accelerate detox or increase bile production more than a person's body can handle, like if you turn up bile production and they're leaking it, then they could seem worse. So this is a very important concept of understanding that the toxic bile is, as I say, it's the root cause of people's chronic problems. It's also the solution, because we need to make it and poop it out so we can get rid of it. The poop is the best way to get rid of the toxic bile. I think of the bile as the liver's poop.
Yeah.
So your liver poops out bile, and then we want to poop that out. We don't want it going back into the system. But we also have to realize that like certain things people can do, like when people think of their comfort foods, right? Let's say somebody gets stressed or they're not feeling good or whatever, and they go and they eat things that are, high in sugar, high in starch, they just eat these comfort foods, which we normally look at and we go, those are not good for you. Like any normal person would go, that's not good for you. But then the person says, but I feel better when I eat it. Well, it's most likely that combination of things is somehow either changing their bile recipe or changing their bile output so it's less. And then they feel better for a while. It doesn't fix anything, and that's why it comes back. So this is one of the problems with a lot of the supplements that are out there. Nearly all of the medications and some of the diets that are out there is people don't realize that the reason why a lot of these things are kind of faddish and they come and go is because a lot of people at the start do these things, and they're the people who get the bile slow down. And they're like, oh my gosh, my symptoms are so much better. This is the most amazing thing. And then everybody, a lot of people start doing it. And as you have more and more people start doing it and more sicker people do it who can't kick the can down the road as far, then you start seeing more and more people saying, this doesn't work. It didn't work. It made me worse. And then the fad kind of fades away, whether it's a diet or a supplement or a medication. So this is what we do is we are most concerned with essential nutrients. with specifically minerals and nicotinic acid or flush niacin. The flush is actually the niacin cleaning out the skin. That's actually what it is. It's a rapid detox process of the skin. It doesn't feel great, but such is the nature. Not all things that help us feel great. But there's very few that I tolerate. Like usually I have a rule, which if somebody feels worse on something, stop taking it, or take less. There's no pushing through. We don't do that. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the big idea of how it is all in my opinion and in my experience, it is all related to the liver. And as people start to understand toxic bile theory, if you want to, after watching this, if you want to get the basics of toxic bile theory, that is on my YouTube. It's either live stream 71 or live stream 53. Those are the two where I go over the basics of toxic bile theory in detail, so people can get that. But the cool thing is once people understand toxic bile theory, they often can look into their history and understand why certain things they did made them feel better for a while, but then they got worse, or why certain things immediately made them feel worse, or why things in the past that they did over the long term slowly helped them feel better. So it does start to explain a lot of things. So it's kind of fun because then people start to understand it, and we can then choose, if we know that, let's say, really high dose vitamin C will slow down your bile production and it will slow down your detox. And that's how people see these amazing short-term effects of it. We can use that if we choose to. If we have somebody who's detoxing too hard for whatever reason, we can choose to use that to slow it down. We now have tools to, in a way, manipulate the body into what we want to do. If, let's say, somebody pushes too hard and they dig themselves into a hole, and they know, oftentimes I know that 8 grams of vitamin C in the past, 8 grams of ascorbic acid, I used to use it and it would shut down my allergies. It would just shut them down. It was great at the time, but now I would never do that because, well, first of all, I got rid of my allergies. That's another thing. A lot of times we have people who have skin issues, and as they start to pay attention to their food problems, like which foods, intolerances, sensitivities, allergies, all that stuff, as they pay attention to it, their food list can often get very, very tight, very, very small. And this is even before the vitamin A diet comes in. Well, what we see is that as people avoid vitamin A more and more, their food allergies get less and less, and they can tolerate foods that they didn't used to. Well, I could go into the research and show there's quite a few studies showing the more vitamin A that kids are exposed to in their infancy or youth, the more allergies and the more atopy they have. I don't know how to say that word, but atopic dermatitis stuff they tend to have. So the more skin issues and the more allergies they tend to have. And while we're on that, I'll tie together one more thing. Regardless of what people want to think about dairy, whether, I'm not going to argue about raw or pasteurized or homogenized or any of that stuff. It has been known for a very, very, very long time in kind of alternative medicine or nutrition, long before pasteurization, that when you have somebody with a skin issue or allergies, get them off of dairy. That's been known forever. Well, what does dairy have a lot in it of? Vitamin A. Also eggs. The top 2 allergy foods in this world today, dairy and eggs. And here I am telling you that vitamin A in supplements and foods has been connected to allergies and skin conditions in children. And then we see eggs, the yolks are very high in vitamin A, and we see dairy as the top 2 allergic foods. I don't think it's an allergy, actually. I don't really believe in the term allergy anymore. It's a toxin reaction. So yeah, we just start to connect. These are the things that I do. We just start to connect all these things, and they all start to make sense. And then people become truly empowered to choose what they eat because now they know what it's doing. It's not just I don't get along with that food because I don't know why. I just don't get along with it. Well, now we have better reasons. There's more things than just vitamin A in foods. There's sulfur, There's polyphenols like antioxidants. We don't necessarily want these things. They slow down the detox system, but they're pushed on us as like good for detox and other things like that. So yeah, it all starts to make sense after a while, and then people start getting better. And the crazy thing is they start losing their taste for the foods that they used to have. We have to remember that things that are addictive are by definition toxic. We get addicted to toxic things. You know, I like meat. And if I didn't eat red meat for a couple of days, I'd be like, can I please eat some red meat? But I'm not going to have any like withdrawal symptoms. I'm not going to be shaking. I'm not going to be, you know, running around tearing people's heads off, like sweating. And, you know, I'm not going to have like withdrawals. I would like to eat some red meat, but it's not like an addiction kind of thing. Whereas you should see on the internet when you start talking to people about taking away their, you know, I'm not taking it away, but they will. It's actually been shown in the research that carotenoids like beta carotene, carrots, are as addictive as cigarettes. There's multiple papers on this. Like people who have quit both cigarettes and the one paper, people who had quit both cigarettes and carrots, beta carotene, plant vitamin A. 3 of the people said quitting cigarettes was harder than quitting beta carotene. 3 of the people said quitting beta carotene was harder than quitting cigarettes, and 3 people said it was about the same. So when we're talking about, like, why would people get upset when you start talking about taking away their dairy or taking away their eggs or taking away their liver or taking away their brightly colored plant foods, the eat the rainbow thing? Because they're actually closet addicts to it because it's a toxin. And then when you get people off of it and their health issues go away, their tastes actually change and they don't want these foods anymore. And they wonder how they ever liked them. Because it's like the more I have a saying, poison begets poison. So as we become more toxic, we want more toxic things. It's like the downhill slope cycle kind of thing. And as we start cleaning the system out, the system becomes more able to recognize toxic things. And then it doesn't want them as much.
I just want to go back a little bit, actually. So when you were saying, you know, people go onto a fad and it could be a diet, you know, if you look at the 2 extremes that we have today, because you've got vegan diet on one end and you've got the carnivore diet on the other end, right? And when you were saying, first of all, you know, let's say excess intake of vitamin E, I mean, I guess that's quite possible on a carnivore diet. And then
E or A?
A, sorry.
A, okay.
Yeah. And then if you're on a vegan diet, that's going to slow down your bile, right?
Yep.
So when you were saying, I said, so people go on these fads, they feel better for a while. And then after a while, things start to come back. That's kind of what went through my head, but I guess even more so for kind of, you know, the vegan style diet where they're literally just slowing down the bile, but now they're actually getting more and more toxic.
Well, I could go through those.
Yeah, definitely. Please do. Yeah.
Okay.
Imagine being able to finally say goodbye to the constant itchiness, discomfort, and embarrassment of eczema. Meet Lissa, a 25-year-old accounts manager who struggled with her lifelong eczema until she found a solution that changed her life. Lissa reached out to me feeling skeptical after countless failed attempts to find relief. But with a personalised diet and lifestyle plan tailored to her individual needs, we were able to identify and treat an underlying fungal infection that had been exacerbating her eczema. Lissa's eczema not only cleared up, but she also unexpectedly experienced relief from headaches and a dramatic improvement in her asthma. And as her skin healed, so did her confidence, leading to a newfound sense of self-assurance and empowerment. If you're tired of feeling uncomfortable in your own skin and want to experience the same life-changing results as Lissa, take the next step towards clear, healthy skin. Schedule a consultation with me today at www.bodycheck.co.uk/consultation and take the first step towards a happier, healthier you. Don't let eczema control your life any longer. Take charge of your health and unlock the confidence and freedom you deserve. Your journey to great skin starts now.
So, in the research, when researchers want to create what is called cholestasis in animals, cholestasis means toxic bile is leaking into the bloodstream. That's the definition of it. So when they want to create cholestasis in animals, if they're doing it with diet alone, they do it with a high sugar diet or a high fat diet or a low protein diet. Those are the three ways that they induce cholestasis, toxic leaky bile in animal diets. So if we go towards the vegan diet, well, first of all, any diet that people go on, if they cut out all the crap processed foods, right, that's going to have them feeling better, right? If they cut out all the crap processed foods, the ultra processed foods and all that stuff, and let's say they move more towards organic, so they're getting less glyphosate and less of all these other pesticides and less of all this other crap, of course they're going to feel better for a while. They're putting less toxins in their system. That makes sense. Nobody's denying that. That's a good thing in general. Like glyphosate, actually, I've been over this in a lot of my stuff. Roundup, glyphosate slows down a very specific point of vitamin A detox where it's turning certain more damaging retinoic acids into this enzyme would make more damaging retinoic acids into less damaging retinoic acids. And glyphosate specifically inhibits that. So all of a sudden, we're keeping the more damaging retinoic acids in our system longer if we're eating glyphosate than if we didn't have it in our system. And the funny thing is two things came around in the late 70s and early 80s that are really damaging people today. And it's in the food supply everywhere. Once you learn about it, it's everywhere. There's glyphosate and there's ivermectin. Ivermectin is basically in all the animals, like it's everywhere. For people to think that it's going to save the world, no, you've been eating it and your animals have been eating it, and it's been everywhere since like the 2000s when they started just putting it into everything. So, yeah. So anyway, there's that whole thing. So we have things that inhibit detox, and ivermectin specifically, I could show you the research, slows down ALDH. We can do this over and over with all these things. So back to the vegan diet. So if somebody was doing the vegan diet, I'm going to generalize the vegan diet here. I'm not talking about like keto vegan or if there was such, I mean, geez, everybody's got all these weird permutations of these things. So a vegan diet in general, it's going to be hard to get much protein. I'm not going to say you can't do it, but it's much more challenging. I mean, when I had people who were vegans or people who are vegans, and I say, I need you to get 50 grams of total protein a day, 50 grams minimum, absolute minimum from any sources. Whatever you're using, I need at least 50 grams. And some of them are like, that's hard on a vegan diet. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. I mean, people can do protein powders or whatever, but still, lack of protein will cause liver problems. Now, what is, in terms of the typical vegan diet, what does it have going for it in terms of those three diets that I said? Well, it's lower in fat. So it's not going to be an excessive fat diet. One of the other problems with the vegan diet is it tends to be very high in plant vitamin A, right? If you're eating plant foods that are red, the part that you're eating, if it's red or yellow or orange or dark green, those are the highest vitamin A plant foods. So if you're eating those, which it's really hard to have a vegan diet that's not eating those, you're going to be taking in a lot of plant vitamin A. However, you really need fat to absorb plant vitamin A. So if you were eating a low fat yet high plant vitamin A vegan diet, you're still not going to absorb that much of it. So that's on your side. And then the vegan diet would also tend to have a lot of fiber. Soluble fiber specifically helps you to grab onto bile. Soluble fiber helps trigger bile dumping. It helps grab onto bile. It feeds your gut biome. And then it helps you to poop out the bile. So a vegan diet, by definition, would tend to have quite a bit of fiber in it. So it has that going for it. And then, some vegan diets are just trash and they're full of sugar. Like, I'm not against fruit, but the problem with fruit is there's very few low vitamin A fruits. The main ones we talk about apples, bananas, pears, green grapes. Those are the main fruit that we do on the program. If they're out there eating, mangoes and papayas and all these yellow and orange fruits and red ones, then that's going to be a lot of vitamin A again, and a lot of sugar. So the liver doesn't like those. So long term, those would be the issues there. Now, if we go over to the other side, then I help people from all of these diets. Like, people who come to me have been doing all these, some variation of all these things. I was a vegetarian for probably 2 years. It ended up being, I was at the end of it, and I was even trying to get 150 grams of protein a day. Never got there, but I was trying. So I had the goal. I was usually getting at least 100, but I was eating all the soy garbage, the fake meat crap, and I was still doing dairy, and I was still doing eggs. And by the end of those 2 years, I was the sickest and weakest I'd ever been in my life. So I didn't do vegan, but I did vegetarian. So then we go to the carnivore side. So the nose to tail carnivore. So where they're eating basically anything that's either in an animal or from an animal. So we're talking about, there's going to be a lot of muscle meat. That's what most people base it around. And that's good. Muscle meat is fine. We have people eat a lot of muscle meat on our program, and we'll get to that when we get to the all muscle meat carnivore version. But when people do nose to tail, they're typically doing a ton of eggs, tons of vitamin A there with fat, right? Mm-hmm. They're doing a ton of dairy. They're often doing a lot of dairy. They're doing organ meats. Liver is the highest food in vitamin A you can eat. And then kidneys are just also toxic in it and full of heavy metals. And then we've got, they might be doing pork fat, lard. There's so much vitamin A in lard that they called it lard factor before they knew what it was. Lard factor is a synonym for vitamin A. So there's tons of vitamin A in pork. I don't care what the USDA guidelines say. Or the USDA charts and whatever. There's forms of vitamin A that are in things, that retinaldehyde and retinoic acid, that they don't measure. They only measure retinol. So we're going to kind of blow this whole vitamin A deficiency science wide open very soon by doing some very specific testing on foods that they use in the studies and show that there's always been vitamin A in it. They've been poisoning the animals with vitamin A and then calling it deficiency. So anyway, so that nose to tail, the most easily stored and the most damaging vitamin A. You remember how I told you the vitamin A gets more damaging the further along the path it goes? Well, the animals have already put it down 1 or 2 or 3 steps. And so animal vitamin A is the most toxic that you could eat. So nose to tail carnivores, there's a reason why there are no long-term, like 10-year plus nose to tail carnivores, because they all quit before then because they're vitamin A toxic. They don't know it. Some of them don't ever figure it out, but that's why. So then, and that would also tend to be a very high fat diet. So you have a high fat diet plus a lot of vitamin A, recipe to store it in the liver and the body fat, and just it's a disaster. So now keto, obviously I'm not a fan of keto. I'm not a fan of high fat diets. We are not designed for high fat diets. If you think about without, commercial feed, without farmers feeding animals, like as much as the animals can eat, and they're, the farmers want fatter animals, whether it's grass fed or not. They don't want skinny animals because they don't make as much money. So we understand that farmers want fatter animals. If people were out in the wild eating what they could get, if somebody wants to say paleo-ish, whatever, it doesn't matter. We can put a term on it. But I mean, they're going to be eating animals that are game animals, super lean. Game animals are super lean. Then we've got fruits, no fat, vegetables, no fat. If people actually think they would find a lot of nuts and seeds out in the wild, I mean, they're fooling themselves. And then people are like, avocados. And I'm like, give me a break, right? And then there's grains, no fat, basically, and beans, no fat. So the normal human diet, if we did not have these farmers fattening up animals and we didn't make industrial oils and fats, and we didn't eat handfuls of nuts and seeds that were already cracked open for us, high-fat diets would be basically impossible. Humans are not designed for that naturally. So anyway, I don't even spend time on the keto diet. I get so many people who've done the keto diet come to me. So it's a high-fat diet. It's low sugar. That's nice. Mm. And it's high protein generally. That's nice. But I mean, how does the liver store fat-soluble toxins? With fat. What do we have a problem called? Silent liver disease is coming up. What's that associated with? Fatty liver. If you had too many fat-soluble toxins coming in that you bind to fat to store them, and you're going to store them either in the liver or the body fat, what might we call it if the liver was developing an excess amount of fat to store an excess amount of toxins? We'd call it fatty liver. What color is fatty liver? It's yellow. What color is vitamin A? It's yellow. So we start connecting all these things. Mm. Then, all muscle meat carnivore. Okay, so I want to be clear on this. All muscle meat carnivore works for people generally at the start and potentially for a long time really well because there's plenty of protein on it. Depending upon the meat they're picking, it's not necessarily that high in fat because they're not adding all these, eggs and dairy and all this stuff. It's just beef, right? Or bison or poultry or whatever. So if you can make that diet relatively like what I would call like normal fat, the fat that's in the food, without having a bunch of vitamin A. So all muscle meat carnivore is very high in zinc, which we want. It's also low in copper and it's low in vitamin A. These are things that we want. Muscle meat is about the lowest food in vitamin A that you can get. So there's a lot of good things about it. The only thing that I don't particularly like about it, or the thing I would say that could be improved, is if somebody's not eating very much in the way of carbohydrates, or they're not getting soluble fiber, they are starving the bifidobacteria in their guts, and they are changing their gut biome for the worse, and eventually that will cause them problems. That could be solved by simply doing, we have people having a really good results doing all muscle meat carnivore with some soluble fiber source. Whether that's they eat some apples or they take some psyllium fiber. They don't even have to eat a food. They could just do some psyllium fiber, or they could eat some oats on occasion. It's just as long as they get some soluble fiber and some carbs in on occasion, they could be probably 90% muscle meat carnivore and then just add in some soluble fiber stuff to it and do great. Because we need the soluble fiber to soak up the bile. Because if they're not getting anything to grab the bile, and one of the things that a lot of muscle meat carnivores come about is they're like, I don't hardly poop at all. Well, if you're not pooping, you're not getting rid of the bile the way you're supposed to. Like there's a reason why we have flat molars, and that's for chewing plant-based stuff. We are designed as omnivores. We are omnivores. Yep. That's why we can live just about anywhere. Yes, we could survive. We can survive on a vegan diet. We can survive on a carnivore diet. Is it necessarily the best for us? Probably not, is my assessment. But we can survive on it, and there's, with just little tweaks, we can get there. So what do we see on the all muscle meat carnivore? Low sugar, right? Not crazy excessive fat. And then what was the other one? Oh, it's fat and sugar, and then it's got plenty of protein. And it's got plenty of zinc, which is one thing that almost everybody's deficient in. So that's where that diet itself is very good from the foundation. Then it just needs a couple tweaks. So then what we do is we just have people to get soluble fiber. They can do, beans, normal, like cooked beans, whatever type you like, are generally a good source of soluble fiber. If you tolerate them, not everybody tolerates them. So if you don't tolerate them, don't eat them. Grains, barley and oats are the highest in soluble fiber of all the grains, but other grains work too. Then we have, there's some low vitamin A fruit. We talked about them. There's some low vitamin A vegetables. Basically, if you're going to eat a vegetable and you want to know if it's low vitamin A or not, is the part that you're going to eat white or off-white or light green? If you say the part's not white or off-white or light green, then we say it's got a lot of vitamin A in it or polyphenols in it. So don't eat it, or at least don't eat it very often. So that's kind of That's kind of the basics of, and then we see now, oh, get this. I was just going over this on Twitter the other day. Now dry fasting is becoming the thing, right? So now people are fasting with no food and no water. This kind of goes along with the whole idea of vitamin A toxicity. So we have these people bouncing from these, the crap diets. We have like the crap American diet, or to vegan, or to keto, or to carnivore, or low carb, or whatever. And so they keep bouncing between them. They get some improvements for a while, but then the problems either come back or they just get new problems. That's one of the problems in health is if you solve one problem while you create a new problem, people will claim that they solved the problem, but they don't talk about the new problem, that's important. Like you could take a medication and fix the symptoms of one problem, but you gave yourself side effects or new symptoms of another problem. But then the doctors and the pharma cartel are happy to say they fixed this problem, and they just don't talk about the new problem. So we don't want to do that with diets either. But dry fasting, I predicted fasting would get very, very big, whether it's just, water fasting or even now we're to dry fasting, because people are eating the wrong foods and drinking the wrong things, and they can bounce around and they can try all these things. And then what if none of these things actually work, what's the thing that's finally going to give them relief? Well, not eating. So then they don't eat and they start going, I feel amazing. And I go, yeah, I know why that is. When you don't eat, you don't dump bile. If you don't dump bile, you don't leak it into your system. If you don't leak the bile into your system, that is the cause of your health issues at the core. You feel better and all your stuff goes away. And then you go back to eating and your problems come back because all you did was give yourself symptomatic relief. So kind of like with toxic bile theory, we can explain why these things feel so good and seem to have such amazing results. But then the problems come back because the liver was storing all this. I mean, the liver has less work to do when somebody's fasting, right? You're not taking in any toxins above, what your body's making. But you're also not pooping and not peeing and getting rid of toxins, and you're not dumping bile. And so that's how things can look better, but you're not necessarily moving forward because you're not getting rid of waste as well. So anyway.
Yeah, interesting. Is there like an amount of vitamin A that people can process per day safely? I know it's probably going to differ from person to person and their fat intake and things like that, but that's a great question. People love that question. Oh my gosh. Is there an amount? So it would be like saying, just as a quick example, if somebody said to you, how many miles can I drive on a tank of gas? How many miles can I drive on a tank of gas? And then they, any smart person goes, okay, wait. How many gallons does the gas tank hold? What kind of car is it? How many miles to the gallon? And they start asking all these questions. And then you go, well, you can't, you eventually get to the point where you go, you just can't ask that question because there's too many variables. Yeah.
With detox, I mean, the idea here is, right, if we're talking about, let's say we're talking about a bank account of vitamin A. We want to deplete the liver and the body fat. We want to deplete that account of vitamin A. So then your goal would be, just logically, we would say, well, you want to put as little into that account as possible, and you want to withdraw as much as you can from that account. That's how you would empty an account the quickest. Yeah. So we get into issues of what this is in the research. You can find it in various ways they state it, but the more toxic a person is, the slower they detox. Kind of like, cars. As cars run, they get more dirty, they get less efficient because there's gunk in the way of it. So the more toxic people are, the slower they detox. Generally, the older people, well, this is kind of goes along with my guidelines to people who want to get better, and I have to set their expectations so they don't get, overly impatient or greedy and want to get better faster than their body's going to allow. So older people generally are going to have a slower time at it. They're going to take longer. Why is this? Well, they've been alive longer and they've accumulated more toxicity, which slows their detox. Okay. Next, we get into the more intense their main issue is. Well, the more intense the issue is, the more toxicity there's involved, the slower they are detoxing already. Then we have the more different issues they have. Well, that would kind of reflect that they have lots of different toxins in them and that they've been accumulating them. And then they're seeing just weak link break, link break 1, weak link break 2, weak link break 3, and we'd see the weak links breaking. So the more issues they have. Then we have, this is the sad one for you ladies. Generally, women are going to have a much slower time of detox. Why is this? In the research, women make less bile than men. It just is. So the less bile you make, the less fast you're going to be able to get rid of things. Then there's also the things of all the crap that the ladies are putting on their skin, all the scented stuff. Basically, if something's scented, it's toxic. That's just, don't use scented stuff.
Yeah.
It's very simple. But they're putting it on their skin. Do you know that you can absorb vitamin A through your skin products on your face? Like I wrote a whole thread on it. Like Europe actually banned vitamin A in certain skin cosmetic products. It absolutely goes into your skin. To give an idea of how dangerous this is, Retin A, there was a study on veterans, U.S. military veterans, and they gave them Retin A cream to put on their face. They were hoping, I think it was going to be a 6-month study or something, or maybe a year. And they gave them Retin A and they said, put it on your face. We're going to see if it prevents skin cancer. So they're going to give them a pharmaceutical cream of retinoic acid to put on their face, see if it is going to prevent skin cancer. This is the same stuff that I said was chemical peel. So they're just doing a lower dose. Well, what happened in that study? They stopped the study early because too many of the veterans were dying early who were in the Retin A group.
Wow.
Too many of them were dying. And then the kicker to this is they had actually not allowed veterans in the study, if they thought they had a high risk of dying early, they did not allow them in the study. So they'd already separated out the people they thought were going to die. And they still had too many people die. It's wild. Like the only supplements you hear the media bash generally, when the media is going to bash supplements, they bash 3 supplements: beta carotene, which is vitamin A supplements like retinol palmitate, and vitamin E. Those are the 3 supplements they bash. They're all fat soluble, and 2 of them are vitamin A. And then there's the Retin A study. Like beta carotene studies, at least 3 giant beta carotene studies have been stopped because they started seeing more cancer and more deaths and other stuff in the beta carotene group. This stuff is horrible.
So I just want to check I've been listening. So just to kind of summarize a little bit, then I'm going to ask you to add on. So if someone has psoriasis, in terms of diet, they're going to be looking at muscle meats, light colored vegetables like white, light green, cream colored vegetables, apples, bananas, pears. There was one other fruit you mentioned, I can't remember.
Green grapes. Green grapes specifically.
Green grapes, yeah. And that would be the main basis of someone's diet.
Yeah, you could put in grains in there, like the just whole grains. But if people tolerate them, the best ones of the whole grains is generally oats. Barley is a lot of fiber, and some people can't handle that much. But yeah, it's basically muscle meats, beans, grains, the low vitamin A fruits, and the low vitamin A vegetables, and water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apart from dietary, is there anything else that you might suggest for people?
Well, one of the biggest things that we help with, there's kind of the supplements that we do tend to use. Like I said, we do hair and blood analysis. It really helps with zinc and copper to figure those out. We want zinc. We don't want too much copper. I do have a whole episode. Like I said, I have a whole episode of the live stream on psoriasis. I have a whole episode on acne too. So the minerals we tend to look at and make sure people are getting enough of. We look at, in terms of the electrolytes, we look at magnesium, we look at potassium, we look at sodium. We don't worry about calcium. Most people are just way too full of calcium. They don't realize it, but they're too full of calcium in the places they don't want it. But that calcium was stolen from their bones.
Yeah.
Research shows it only takes 3,000 units of vitamin A a day to worsen or cause osteoporosis. 3,000 units. Like, a lot of people are getting that with breakfast alone. So we look at those. So those are what I call the electrolytes. Then we get to the big minerals. We look at zinc, selenium, and molybdenum. Really, molybdenum is a critical mineral for detox that almost nobody knows about. And then other supplements that we do use, lactoferrin. I won't get into explaining that. I have a whole live stream on that. We get into soluble fiber, whether it's from foods or from supplements like sun fiber or psyllium or apple pectin, or there's even some people out there who use glucomannan, which is a very gelling fiber. The more a food or a fiber tends to gel, like when you think of if you made refried beans and you mashed them all up and then you let it cool off and it kind of hardens, like that's the soluble fiber in it gelling. Kind of like if you made oatmeal and you then let it cool, and the gelling that kind of happens, that's soluble. That's what soluble fiber does. That's the soaking up water and soaking up bile adsorption kind of quality of it. So there would be the soluble fibers. We do use quite a bit of charcoal for people who tolerate it. If charcoal's too constipating, don't use it yet. You're not making enough bile in your guts yet. It's not going to where it needs to go.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, we do use a lot of flush niacin or nicotinic acid. I mean, I shouldn't say we use a lot of it. We use it regularly. Flush niacin or nicotinic acid helps you make the NAD that is necessary for you to run like 400 metabolic pathways in the body, especially ALDH. So that's kind of the main basis in terms of supplements and other stuff that we use to help. Some people do this whole process, like Grant did it with beef and bison and white and brown rice and the black beans. I still have some concerns that there may be some zinc deficiency long term on this, because going through detox uses up a lot of zinc. But we have some people doing like an all muscle meat carnivore diet with they're adding some fiber. We have some people doing what they call the cowboy diet, which is just beef and beans. We have some people doing more of a mixed diet approach that's not super consistent every day like I do. There's all sorts of approaches. People often who have come to us who have been on very restrictive diets before, they look at this and they go, well, this is easy. Like, this is not a problem. You're not like outlawing any major food group. There's stuff in each food group that you can use. And then when they get better, then they really don't care anymore, because we fix stuff that they haven't been able to fix. And then it goes away and it's gone. Like, it's not, I stopped taking this supplement and this problem came back. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get it gone. Now, people may need, this is a reality. We live in a world where the food is depleted, right? So if the food is depleted, if you don't supplement, you may not get what you need for what you might consider optimal health. I don't like that word optimal, because what is it? It doesn't really have a definition. It's just kind of this nebulous thing. But anyway, if there's not enough zinc in your food, for an example, you're not going to have enough zinc, and you need zinc for all sorts of things. So so it's just that what I tell people is like, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get you detoxed. We're trying to fix the toxicities. We're also trying to fix the major deficiencies. And worst case scenario, if somebody wanted to work with my thing for the rest of their lives, every 6 months, they do a hair and a blood test. They adjust their stuff. Hopefully over time, they would need less. That's the goal, right? We don't want to be on tons of supplements forever. We would love to be on less, but we live in a very toxic and deficient world. So we may have to have some help from outside to get what we want, what we desire. And then we just go with that. So, that's kind of
cool. I've got one more question, and it's a little indulgent of me, I guess, but I'm going to ask it. So when I was going through my 18 years of acne and I had that period of eczema at the same time, and I'm sure psoriasis sufferers have had this same thing. You ask your medical doctor, has my skin condition got anything to do with diet? And they always say, no, it's got absolutely nothing to do with it. What would you say to a doctor that said there's no link between diet and skin conditions?
Oh, man. Well, if it was my doctor, I'd okay. Well, let me give you a worse example. When people go to a gastroenterologist, like a digestive doctor, and they say, Doc, does diet have anything to do with my digestive problems? And then the doctor says no. Oftentimes, the person sitting there in front of them, the patient, knows already from their own experimentation and their own internet searching and all this stuff. They've tried it, and they've tried taking out certain foods, and they know they feel better when they change their diet. And they're sitting there getting gaslighted by their doctor. No, diet doesn't affect how this process at all. And the person's like, yeah, it does, actually. So skin doctors who say, well, one of the things in alternative medicine, right? They often say the skin health reflects the gut health, right? And in naturopathic medicine, there's in a lot of medicines, they'll say treat the gut first. If you don't know what to do, treat the gut. And then there is the reality that your gut flips over into your skin at your mouth and your rear end. Right? It's like a wrapper. It's like one of those Chinese those like little gelatin things that you can stick your fingers in and you can roll it in it. You know what I mean? Those things.
I don't, but don't worry.
Oh, it's a weird little. It's like a bag it's turned over like we would be if we were turned into a bag that had a hole at the top and a hole at the bottom.
Well, I think we're like a bagel.
Yeah, exactly. That's another great example. Yes, exactly like that. So your skin is your digestive lining and vice versa. They are continuous. So it does make sense that your gut health, if something's affecting your gut, could be reflected on your skin and possibly vice versa. So if a skin doctor, I mean, one of the things skin doctors do, right? If you go into a skin doctor and you have a rash or you have something on your skin, what's one of the first questions they ask you? What do you put on your skin? What do you wash your clothes with? What's your soap? What's this? So they know that if you apply things to your skin, it can irritate it. Okay. Well, then we also have to think, could the opposite be true? Things that come up out of your skin, could they irritate it? Of course, that makes sense. So then why don't, as an example with the gastroenterologist, why don't they ask people, what are you applying to your guts on a daily basis? Because if you're applying the wrong things to your guts, you might be irritating your guts. Okay. So now we're going to think about this. I mean, what would I say to a doctor? I wouldn't ever go to a normal doctor for a skin condition unless it was like life-threatening. I need to shut it down with like corticosteroids or something. But it'd be like a life-threatening. It'd be a very, very serious thing. Because they just get you on the pharmaceutical train, right? And then you're stuck on that forever.
Well, let's put it in a different context. Let's say you were speaking at a conference on a panel, on an expert panel. And let's say you're on an expert panel for psoriasis. And there's, I don't know, dermatologists, let's call it dermatologist. And they say there's no link between food and skin conditions. What would your response be to that?
Well, kind of like what I do in my live streams every week is I'll go through the research connections between bile and the condition. I'll connect the gut biome to it. The gut biome, if it, usually even with those doctors, you might ask them, well, have you seen the research that connects the gut biome to skin conditions? And they'd most likely say, yes, I've heard of that. These probiotics help and da 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 da. Well, then we say, what feeds the gut biome? And they go, well, what you eat. And then we would say, well, okay, so the things you feed your gut biome will either they could make it better or worse. And they'd kind of be, if they're actually being honest, they'd say, well, yeah, the things you feed, like if you feed your garden the right things, it grows better. If you feed your garden the wrong things, it grows worse, or it grows things you don't want. And very simply, then we could say, okay, so then what you feed your gut biome makes it better or worse. And we've now agreed that the gut biome affects your skin conditions. So therefore, what you eat, at least by affecting your gut biome, therefore affects your skin conditions. So we could do this with multiple things. And then also in those live streams, I go through the various toxins that I normally cover. And then I go through the mineral deficiencies in the research that are connected to the issue. So I always do that. I show the toxic bile theory first. I show the toxicities that are connected to it, and then I show the deficiencies. Well, if these things, one of the biggest problems in the skin world is that people are often encouraged to eat more vitamin A. People think it's like the skin vitamin. The worst problems would come about if people were purposely eating more of something that was worse for them. You see how that's where they really catch people. That's why people never get out of these things, is because they keep reading vitamin A is so good for my skin, I got to keep eating it. And then they keep eating it and their skin condition keeps getting worse. So in terms of like the gut biome, that's one way I could talk to them about it. In terms of toxic bile theory, how do we connect that whole treat the gut? If you don't know what to do, treat the gut. And then also the skin health reflects the gut health. Well, what is touching both of those things eventually? The bile comes out, it touches your gut. So if you're treating the gut, a lot of practitioners don't know that you're really actually treating the bile. And then if you leak the bile, if you wanted to treat a skin condition and you treated the gut first, which is where the leaks happen the most, if you were able to address those leaks and you leaked less, or maybe you suppressed bile production and you didn't put out as much bile, then the skin condition would get better by you addressing the gut. So in terms of convincing doctors, I purposely do not try to people might be like, can you talk to my doctor? And I go, no, I am not talking to a wall. Like I'm not here to try to sell people what the way this is going to change medicine is I'm going to help as many people and spread this knowledge as far as I can. People are getting better and people will get better. And then eventually their practitioners of whatever type there's going to be some open-minded ones who say, what'd you do? I can tell you that the lady whose cirrhosis I fixed, like her doctor told her, she said, is there any way to fix this? What can I do? Is there any way to get better? And he said, no, you're pretty much just going to slowly fade, crumble, and die. That's pretty much why. And I'm like, hepatologists have to be the most depressed doctors because they're liver doctors and everything in conventional medicine is liver toxic, basically. So they can't give them any medications. All they can really do is, what do they do? Tell us, don't drink alcohol, and don't do any drugs that you don't have to do. It's got to be the worst job ever. So, but yeah, she fixed it. And then she went to him and he's the guy doing the tests on her that confirmed that it was gone. And he was just kind of like, about her, what she did. Oh, interesting. Like, so they don't care about, it's not that they don't care. It's that they wouldn't know how to integrate it into their framework because they would have to give up everything that they've been doing.
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They absolutely cannot admit. I mean, that they want to go home and be able to sleep at night. So they have to convince themselves that what they're doing is helping more than it's damaging. They have to convince themselves. And then if they see a new way around it, they just, like some people maybe have gone to their doctors, they got better, and the doctor's like, oh, well, you're just lucky.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I guess it just went into spontaneous remission, and they just can't they can't give people responsibility. Doctors in general, if they're doing pharmaceutical medication, or even if they're doing like heavy supplementation, they don't want to give the client or the patient power.
Yeah.
They don't want them to have responsibility because once they have responsibility, they don't come back to the doctor.
Yeah.
I am here teaching people how to fish so that they can go fish on their own and they can then know what the framework is. And if I have people come to me and they're like, Doc, I haven't been eating very good. I've been cheating a lot and I'm not doing as well as I was before. And I'm just kind of like, okay, you know what to do. Like, you know what you were doing when you felt better. So you might want to go back to that, but I don't lecture them. I tell people, I don't care what everyone out there does.
Hmm.
I'm here to give you the tools. It's up to you to use them, because if I stressed over what people were eating, I'd have been dead of stress long ago.
Yeah.
So I can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
And we want people to take, but people for this program, they have to take personal responsibility for their health.
Yeah.
They have to first accept where they are in their health, and that it doesn't matter. I mean, kids are being born jaundiced today. Like 60 to 80% of kids in the US are born jaundiced. Jaundice is bilirubin. It's called bilirubin, but it's bilirubin. That's how they named it. They have so much bile in their blood that they are being born yellow. What this means is they have been born toxic already, with injured livers, with damaged livers. So they are starting life from behind the 8 ball. And when it doesn't, somebody could say, well, I was born jaundiced at birth and it sucks and my liver sucks and I'll never get better. Or we could say, well, just accept that happened. Take where you are right now, and we are going to move forward from here. But you have to just accept that no matter how you got here, here is where you are. And we can go forward from here, or we can just sit here and piss and moan and not get anywhere. Or you can just take more drugs and more herbs and more that nobody has an herb deficiency. Nobody has a drug deficiency. We want to fix the deficiencies that are real and the toxicities that are often. The problem with most of the toxicities is they're unknown, especially with vitamin A.
Yeah.
So we just give them the tools, and then they start doing it. And oftentimes, I tell them you don't have to do it all right away. You could start piece by piece. Just take out this, first get rid of all your vitamin A supplements and skin products. Like, how hard is that? That's easy. If somebody can't do that, then boy, they're not going to make it.
Forget it.
But they might start noticing improvements from that, or they might have a little bit of a withdrawal because it's a toxic, addictive effect. So anyway, so that's kind of like, I don't argue with doctors. I tell people, I'm not talking to your doctor.
Yeah.
You lead the way. I tell people this with their family or with their doctors or with whatever. I say, you don't worry about convincing them. Like, let's say they've been doing it for 2 months or 4 months and their symptoms are so much better. And how do I convince my wife or my mom or my doctor or whatever? I say, just keep getting better. Lead by example. Get yourself better. Let them see you. Maybe you could even, ham it up a bit and be like, oh, I'm so glad that this problem is gone. I didn't used to be able to do this when I had X condition. And now I can. And then they go, wow, that's cool. What'd you do? And then you can tell them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can say, oh, remember that diet I started 6 months, a year ago? Yeah, it's fixed all my stuff. And then they go, oh, and then maybe they'll come and maybe they won't. But, I have family members who hardly know anything about what I do because they don't care, and I'm not going to drag them into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we just have to kind of, you got to let people kind of come to it on their own.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so I don't even want to speak at my national convention. Like if I'm not going to ask them, if they eventually ask me, I'll do it. But I'm not pursuing it. I'm not trying to convince a bunch of people, like especially in the naturopathic field, who like love vitamin A. They'll megadose people on vitamin A.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Cool. So one of the reasons I started this podcast, was to, share information from people like yourself and to help people out there. But another reason why I did this podcast is because I love to learn as well. So, this episode has been great for me because I've learned a lot in this episode, and that's why I do this podcast. So it's been really great. And what's next for you, Garrett?
What's next? Well, the big things we're working on, we're working on some more supplements that are in line with what we do. We're working on, I'm going to be doing a training seminar for anybody who wants to take it and learning how to do for people who, if anybody's interested in this after watching, if you're a practitioner or anything like that, you need to be in the Love Your Liver program, and you need to be like doing the diet stuff before you get there. Cause this seminar that I'm going to do is not a rehash of my life's work in the program. So, but I'm going to be teaching people like the hair analysis, the way I do it, which is different than anybody else out there. The several bloods I do, we do 4 blood tests. That's it. We don't do giant blood panels, because most blood panels are symptoms too. People don't realize that, but like if you had low red blood cells, anemia, like is that a cause or is that a symptom? Well, it's a symptom. And then we start going, well, what causes it? And then we can look deeper. It could be iron deficiency. It could be, copper toxicity. It could be vitamin A toxicity. It could be all sorts of things. So then we dig deeper anyway. And then it'll be kind of some stuff about client patient management, and how to walk them through these things and what to watch for and all that stuff. So there's that seminar. I'm working on, eventually I'm going to be taking a little break from seeing so many clients, and I'm going to be redoing my program, my life's work, to fully update it and streamline it and distill it and make it better. And I'm still trying to get the word out there, going on as many podcasts as I can so people can find out about it and decide for themselves and see what they think.
Excellent. And where can people find you online?
Okay. Yeah. My main website is nutritiondetective.com. That's where we have the supplement store. And if people want to sign up for consultations and other things like that, I'm on Twitter a lot as NutriDetect, NutriDetect, because I can't fit Nutrition Detective in there. What else? We do have presences on Facebook and Instagram and other stuff like that. The Love Your Liver program you can find that at members.nutritiondetective.com. And then on YouTube, you can just find me at Nutrition Detective. So I do a weekly live stream there. We just covered diabetes last week, and that was a barn burner. I tend to, when I'm hitting all this research, that last live stream was 4 hours long.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm showing all the research on the screen. It's not just me blabbing.
Was that type 1 or type 2 or both? Or
it was mainly just if I had to say it was type 2 mainly.
Yeah.
But type 1 is an autoimmune, right? And funny thing, type 1 diabetes has always been connected with dairy allergy. What a coincidence. So it's autoimmunity is toxicity. This is a key thing for people to know. It's not your immune system going dumb. It's a toxicity process, and that's what they cannot talk about. The pharma cartel will not talk about toxicity in terms of cancer. Cancer is just storage units for toxicity. That's what it is. Your body's building extra storage units. Just like if you have too much crap in your house and you go and you buy a storage unit to put it in, that's cancer. Like your house can't hold it anymore. So you made more house to put it in. And autoimmunity is just toxicity. And if we fix it, they can induce autoimmunity by giving immunizations. They do it in research. So they can induce autoimmunity by giving an immunization. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, those are the main places you can find me on the internet.
Yeah. I'll make sure all your links are in the show notes. And could you possibly send me some links of research? Or maybe you might have a page on your website, maybe.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
If not, don't worry. But if you could, that'd be great just to share with the audience as well.
The best place to find if somebody wants to read and look at the references, that would be on my Twitter, on my bio. I call it my pinned thread of threads. So it's like a master thread of all my big threads. And there's when people get through that, they have quite the education. And then also they're just starting on the like on my live streams, there's research every one. We try to list the titles of the studies. I probably went through 50 studies on the last one. So yeah, there's research everywhere in my stuff. Since I'm the first guy out there, I feel absolutely obligated to show the research that backs up what I say and not just make statements.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Great stuff. Garrett, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this episode. I love nerding out, so this has been really fun for me. But yeah, thanks a lot for your time.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. So that's all from Garrett and me for this week. But don't forget to join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.